Perspective switch, Captain Togram, Roxolana fleet. As was their practice, the ships of the Roxolana fleet gathered above the pole of the new planet's hemisphere with the most land. Because everyone would be coming to the same spot, the doctrine made visual rendezvous easy. Soon, only 4 ships were unaccounted for. A scout ship hurried around to the other pole, found them, and brought them back. Always some water lovers every trip, Togram chuckled to the steerers as he brought them the news. He took every opportunity he could to go to their dome, not just for the sunlight, but also because, unlike many soldiers, he was interested in planets for their own sake. With any head for figures, he might have tried to become a steerer himself. He had a decent hand with quill and paper, so Rancisk and Algren were willing to let him spell them at the spyglass and add to the sketch maps they were making of the world below. "Funny sort of planet," he remarked. "I've never seen one with so many forest fires or volcanoes or whatever they are on the dark side." "I still think they're cities," Algren said, with a defiant dance at Rancisk. "They're too big and too bright," the senior steerer said patiently. The argument, plainly, had been going on for some time. "This is your first trip off planet, isn't it, Algren?" Togram asked. "Well, what if it is?" "Only that you don't have enough perspective. Egelok on Roxolana has almost 1 million people, and from space it's next to invisible at night. It's nowhere near as bright as those lights either. Remember, this is a primitive planet. I admit it looks like there's intelligent life down there, but how could a race that hasn't even stumbled across the hyperdrive build cities 10 times as great as Egelok?" "I don't know," Algren said sulkily, "but from what little I can see by moonlight, those lights look to be in good spots for cities, on coasts or along rivers or whatever." Rancisk sighed. "What are we going to do with him, Togram? He's so sure he knows everything, he won't listen to reason. Were you like that when you were young?" "Till my clan fathers beat it out of me anyway. No need getting all excited, though. Soon enough, the flyers will go down with their Luigi, and then we'll know." He swallowed a snort of laughter, then sobered abruptly, hoping he hadn't been as gullible as Algren when he was young. Perspective switch, human, SR-81 pilot. "I have one of the alien vessels on radar," the SR-81 pilot reported. "It's down to 50,000 meters and still descending." He was at his own plane's operational ceiling, barely half as high as the ship entering the atmosphere. "For God's sake, hold your fire," ground control ordered. The command had been dinned into him before he took off, but the brass were not about to let him forget. He did not really blame them. One trigger-happy idiot could ruin humanity forever. "I'm beginning to get a visual image," he said, glancing at the head-up display projected in front of him. A moment later, he added, "It's one damn funny-looking ship. I can tell you that already. Where are the wings?" "We're picking up the image now, too," the ground control officer said. "They must use the same principle for their in-atmosphere machines as they do for their spacecraft, some sort of anti-gravity that gives them both lift and drive capability." The alien ship kept ignoring the SR-81, just as all the aliens had ignored every terrestrial signal beamed at them. The craft continued its slow descent, while the SR-81 pilot circled below, hoping he would not have to go down to the aerial tanker to refuel. "One question answered," he called to the ground. "It's a warplane. No craft whose purpose was peaceful would have had those glaring eyes and that snarling, fang-filled mouth painted on its belly. Some USAF ground attack aircraft carried similar markings. At last, the alien reached the level at which the SR-81 was loitering. The pilot called the ground again. "Permission to pass in front of the aircraft?" he asked. "Maybe everybody's asleep in there, and I can wake 'em up." After a long silence, ground control gave a grudging assent. "No hostile gestures," the controller warned. "What do you think I'm going to do, flip him the finger?" the pilot muttered, but his radio was off. Acceleration pushed him back in his seat as he guided the SR-81 into a long, slow turn that would carry it about half a kilometer in front of the vessel from the space fleet. His airplane's camera gave him a brief glimpse of the alien pilot, who was sitting behind a small, dirty windscreen. The being from the stars saw him too. Of that there was no doubt. The alien jinxed like a startled fawn, performing maneuvers that would have smeared the SR-81 pilot against the walls of his pressure cabin, if his aircraft could have matched them in the first place. "I'm giving pursuit," he shouted. Ground control screamed at him, but he was the man on the spot. The surge from his afterburner made the pressure he had felt before a love pat by comparison. Better streamlining made his plane faster than the craft from the starships, but that did not do him much good. Every time its pilot caught sight of him, the alien ship danced away with effortless ease. The SR-81 pilot felt like a man trying to kill a butterfly with a hatchet. To add to his frustration, his fuel warning light came on. In any case, his aircraft was designed for the thin atmosphere at the edge of space, not the increasingly denser air through which the alien flew. He swore, but he had to pull away. As his SR-81 gulped kerosene from the tanker, he could not help wondering what would have happened if he'd turned a missile loose. There were a couple of times he'd had a perfect shot. That was one thought he kept firmly to himself. What his superiors would do if they knew about it was too gruesome to contemplate. Perspective switch, Captain Togram, Rox Salani fleet. The troopers crowded around Togram as he came back from the officers' conclave. "What's the word, Captain? Did the loaf live? What's it like down there?" "The loaf lived, boys," Togram said with a broad smile. His company raised a cheer that echoed deafeningly in the barracks room. "We're going down," they whooped. Ears stood high in excitement. Some soldiers waved plumed hats in the fetid air. Others, of a bent more like their captains, went over to their pallets and began looking at their weapons. "How tough are they going to be, sir?" A gray-furred veteran named Elingua asked as Togram went by. "I hear the flyer pilot saw some funny things." Togram's smile got wider. "By the heavens and hells, Elingua, haven't you done this often enough to know better than pay heed to rumors you hear before planetfall?" "I hope so, sir," Elingua said, "but these are so strange I thought there might be something to them." When Togram did not answer, the trooper shook his head at his own foolishness and shook up a lantern so he could examine his dagger's edge. As inconspicuous as he could, the captain let out a sigh. He did not know what to believe himself, and he had listened to the pilot's report. How could the locals have flying machines when they did not know about gravity? Togram had heard of a race that used hot air balloons before it discovered the better way of doing things, but no balloon could have reached the altitude the locals' flyer had achieved, and no balloon could have changed direction, as the pilot had violently insisted this craft had done. Assume he was wrong, as he had to be, but how was one to take his account of towns as big as the ones whose possibility Rarasisk had ridiculed, of a world so populous there was precious little open space? And lantern signals from other ships showed their scout pilots were reporting the same wild improbabilities. Well, in the long run, it would not matter if this race was as numerous as a Rafo at a picnic. There would simply be that many more subjects here for Roxolana. Perspective switch, Billy Cox, infantryman. "This is a terrible waste," Billy Cox said to anyone who would listen as he slung his duffel bag over his shoulder and tramped out to the waiting truck. "We should be meeting the star people with open arms, not with a show of force." "You tell him, Professor," Sergeant Santos Amoros chuckled from behind him. "Me, I'd sooner stay on my butt in a nice air-conditioned barracks than face LA summer smog and sun any old day. Damn shame you're just a Spec 1. If you were president, you could give the orders any way you wanted, instead of taking them." Cox didn't think that was very fair either. He'd been just a few units short of his MA in poli-sci when the big buildup after the Second Syrian crisis sucked him into the army. He had to fold his lanky length like a jackknife to get under the olive-drab canopy of the truck and down into the passenger compartment. The scats were too hard and too close together. Jamming people into the vehicle counted for more than their comfort while they were there. Typical military thinking, Cox thought disparagingly. The truck filled. The big diesel rumbled to life. A black soldier dug out a deck of cards and bet anyone that he could turn 25 cards into 5 pat poker hands. A couple of greenhorns took him up on it. Cox had found out the expensive way that it was a sucker bet. The black man was grinning as he offered the deck to one of his marks to shuffle. Riff! The ripple of the pasteboards was authoritative enough to make everybody in the truck turn his head. "Where'd you learn to handle cards like that, man?" demanded the black soldier, whose name was Jim, but whom everyone called Junior. Dealing blackjack in Vegas. Riff. Hey, Junior, Cox called. All of a sudden I want $10 on your action. Up yours too, pal, Junior said, glumly watching the cards move as if they had lives of their own. The truck rolled northward, part of a convoy of trucks, MICVs, and light tanks that stretched for miles. An entire regiment was heading into Los Angeles to be billeted by companies in different parts of the sprawling city. Cox approved of that. It made it less likely that he would personally come face to face with any of the aliens. Sandy, he said to Amoros, who was squeezed in next to him, even if I'm wrong and the aliens aren't friendly, what the hell good will hand weapons do? It'd be like taking on an elephant with a safety pin. Professor, like I told you already, they don't pay me to think, nor do you. Just as well, too. I'm going to do what the lieutenant tells me, and you're going to do what I tell you, and everything is going to be fine, right? Sure, Cox said, because Sandy, while he wasn't a bad guy, was a sergeant. All the same, the neo-armalite between Cox's boots seemed very futile, and his helmet and body armor as thin and gauzy as a stripper's negligee. Perspective switch. Captain Togram, Roxolana Fleet. The sky outside the steerer's dome began to go from black to deep blue as the Indomitable entered the atmosphere. There, Olgren said, pointing. That's where we'll land. Can't see much from this height, Togram remarked. Let him use your spyglass, Olgren, Ransik said. He'll be going back to his company soon. Togram grunted. That was more than a comment. It was also a hint. Even so, he was happy to peer through the eyepiece. The ground seemed to leap toward him. There was a moment of disorientation as he adjusted to the inverted image, which put the ocean on the wrong side of the field of view. But he was not interested in sightseeing. He wanted to learn what his soldiers and the rest of the troops aboard the Indomitable would have to do to carve out a beachhead and hold it against the locals. There's a spot that looks promising, he said. The greenery there in the midst of the buildings in the the western part of the city. That should give us a clear landing zone, a good campground, and a base for landing reinforcements. Let's see what you're talking about, Ransisk said, elbowing him aside. Yes, I see the stretch you mean. That might not be bad. Olgren, come look at this. Can you find it again in the War Master's spyglass? All right then, go point it out to him. Suggested as our set-down point. The apprentice hurried away. Ransisk bent over the eyepiece again. He repeated. They build tall down there, don't they? I thought so, Togram said. And there's a lot of traffic on those roads. They've spent a fortune cobblestoning them all, too. I didn't see any dust kicked up. This should be a rich conquest, Ransisk said. Something swift, metallic, and predator-lean flashed past the observation window. By the gods, they do have flyers, don't they? Togram said. In spite of the pilot's claims, deep down he hadn't believed it until he saw it for himself. He noticed Ransisk's ears twitching impatiently and realized he really had spent too much time in the observation room. He picked up his glow-height lantern and went back to his troopers. A couple of them gave him a resentful look for being away for so long, but he cheered them up by passing on as much as he could about their landing site. Common soldiers loved nothing better than inside information. They second-guessed their superiors without it, but the game was even more fun when they had some idea of what they were talking about. A runner appeared in the doorway. Captain Togram, your company will planet from airlock 3. 3, Togram acknowledged, and the runner trotted off to pass orders to other ground troop leaders. The captain put his plumed hat on his head. The plume was scarlet, so his company could recognize him in combat, checked his pistols one last time, and ordered his troopers to follow him. The reeking darkness was as oppressive in front of the inner airlock door as anywhere else aboard the Indomitable, but somehow easier to bear. Soon the doors would swing open, and he would feel fresh breezes riffling his fur, taste sweet, clean air, enjoy sunlight for more than a few precious units at a stretch. Soon, he would measure himself against these new beings in combat. He felt the slightest of jolts as the Indomitable's flyers launched themselves from the mothership. There would be no life aboard them this time, but musketeers to terrorize the natives with fire from above and jars of gunpowder to be touched off and dropped. The Roxolani always strove to make as savage a first impression as they could. Terror doubled their effective numbers. Another jolt came, different from the one before. They were down. This is the end of part 3 of The Road Not Taken by Harry Turtledove. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. I will be posting part 3 shortly.